All right, what's up, y'all, and welcome to the Michael Experience Podcast. I am your orator and originator, Michael, and these are my thoughts on my life, my way. So, in the last episode, we talked all things suppression, aggression, and regression as it pertains to men's emotions, and particularly Black men's emotions, and kind of how that plays into how we connect in friendships, relationships, anything with a ship that's going to sail out from the home harbor. We talked about that. And so, with that, we also talked about being able to protect yourself and thus protect other people. And that could mean walking away or just acknowledging, recognizing, and working through some things. And so when we talk about the journey of how things began and the root cause of things and growing and learning, I wanted to shed some light on, I guess, what I would consider negative bonding habits. So let's get into that. So this is stemming from a place of finding that there are certain men who are married, right? And in my instance of being single these last 2.5 years, as I mention often, um, but in these last 2.5 years, I have encountered two men that I've known in a previous life who both were married, and for whatever reason, they thought it would be okay to try to embark on a situationship or relationship with me. Now, I know everybody's probably thinking, well, Michael, marriage, hard stop. Like, why would you entertain? What was that conversation like? All of that stuff. So I'll just start with the earlier gentleman. I met a gentleman over 10 years ago. I met him at a bar, I want to say. I did. I met him at a bar. I was hanging out with some friends at some event, and I kind of am one of those people that once I've got my hour in, 2 hours max, I don't want to be around a bunch of people anymore. I'm like, I want to go into my own space. Or I want to go somewhere where it's very intimate, where they're playing R&B music, because that's more my vibe. And so I left that place, and I just stumbled into this just regular bar that had probably 10 people in it. And I sashay my way in there and I sit at the bar. And I think at the time, God, I can't remember if I was drinking a Jack and Coke or whether I was testing out an amaretto sour. It was probably one of the two at the time. So I remember the drink being darker, so it had to be one of the two. And so I go to the bar, I order my drink, I sit next to this guy. Now, back then, I wasn't really looking at masculine men or men that I couldn't readily identify as gay as potentials. Like if they were cute, I'd be like, "Oh, he's a cute guy," and I would go on about my business like I would anybody. Like, "Oh God, he's cute." I'd say it to myself, and I'd go on about my business. So I go in there, I'm already like coming off of being around a bunch of energy, and I was like, high energy, not high like they were. Well, you get where I'm going. So I'm sitting at the bar. I give the guy my drink order. He takes my drink order. I'm sitting next to this guy who's like 6'3", 6'4", maybe. I'm 6'1". So I don't often meet guys that are taller than me. I just don't. And then if I'm wearing a cute little, tiptoe, then I'm probably 6'3", 6'4" myself. So I don't really, I very seldomly, I'm not going to say that it's never happened. I very seldomly meet men who are taller than me. And so, but there's this guy there. I didn't pay him any mind. He didn't look like somebody that I would, see as an option. And I get my drink. And so he's just kind of looking at me side eye, like from the side of his eyes or whatever. And I'm like, okay, look, this dude is looking at me. I'm going to need him to go about his business. And so he just kind of looks and then he leans back a little bit. Now, ladies, gentlemen, and they, them, I feel like there are some guys that know they have it, or at least they feel like they know they have it. And so they kind of get a little cocky and arrogant and they lean back a little bit thinking that you're going to make eye contact or you're going to give them the signal to go. Not me. I just want my drink so that I could go on about my business, go find me a quiet corner and just decompress. So I get my drink and in true Michael fashion, I walk away, find me a little corner by the pool table or whatnot. I may have ended up playing pool with some of the guys that were there because I can play pool. I don't look like I can, according to some people, but I listen. I was one of those kids that tried a lot. But anyway, that's the story for a different day. And so anyway, this gentleman comes over and he's like, "Can I buy you another drink or whatever?" I was like, "Sure. Sure you can buy me another drink." Now, I didn't say it so quickly. I honestly played coy for a little bit. But then I was like, "Why not let you buy me another drink?" Of course he wants to talk. And so we're talking and blase scoop. And he's cool. He's a good looking dude or whatever. He has a little vibe about him. I can tell that he smokes though. I'm not a smoker, cigarettes or otherwise, so I can smell it really, really like, because I don't partake. And I'm like, oh, I can smell it on him. And so anyway, I'm just talking to him. I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. And he's like, oh well, can we exchange numbers and can we see each other again? So he wants to walk me to my car. I'm like, sure, you can walk me to my car. So we go to the car. We're having polite conversation. He's a gentleman. He's really a gentleman and all this stuff. But like out of nowhere, he just starts crying. And I can't make this stuff up, but we were talking and he just starts crying and I'm like, oh shit. And he's crying about, breaking up with his guy or whatever. And I'm like, okay, this is not what I bargained for today. And that little drink is not going to be, compensation for this therapy session that is happening here. And so I was like, oh, there. It'll be all right. Go back home and get you some more. You'll be all right. Y'all make up. And so I left that night thinking like, what the hell? But I did give him my phone number, which I forgot. So he did have my phone number or whatever, but he was too embarrassed to reach out to me, I guess once he sobered up and stuff. But he did finally get up the courage to be like, yo, I feel like I owe you a redo, whatever, whatever. I was like, I don't know if I need to get in on this because this is just crazy. Mind you guys, I'm in my early 20s at this time. And so I'm like, child, I don't know what to do with this man or whatever. He's like, come on, like, whatever. So we did. We hung out a couple of times or whatever. He was really, really sweet. And we never really we never really explored anything, although we hung out a couple of times. We didn't explore anything because to me, crying over your ex would suggest to me that you are not over them. And I don't like to dive into the past like your boyfriend. I don't like to go into that because I think that's a slippery slope. And it's inevitably going to turn me off. It really is. And so I was like, yeah, let me just not touch that. Like I just always had a like, don't ask, don't tell kind of policy with that, even though he was already crying. So I kind of went on about my business. We just kind of stopped talking over the years. I moved a couple of times. So fast forward maybe 15 years after the fact, he finds me on Facebook. And I knew he was on Facebook because he would like certain things that I posted, and every now and again he'll put a little compliment down in there, and I'm like, okay, whatever. So one day he DMs me like, hey, we should catch up and blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. Now I could say a million things about him or whatever, but the thing that really got me the most was the fact that emotionally, he was in the same place that he was when I first met him. So over 15 years later, you're telling me that this guy that you are with, same guy, you're still having this back and forth with him. And when he explained that to me, I was like, I really just, it turned me off. I honestly couldn't hear, see, or focus on anything other than that because I'm like, yo, you were in the exact same spot you were in 15 years ago. And that is just crazy to me. Like, I met you and you were in emotional and mental turmoil over this person. And fast forward 15 years later, and you're still in emotional turmoil over this same person. And I'm like, why is it that you feel comfortable trying to, first of all, come after somebody like me? Because I'm not gonna water it down. Somebody like me, why would you think it appropriate to come after somebody like me when you're still tied to a situation? So you don't even have your shit figured out in the sense that you can give your emotional and mental capacity to somebody else because you're still hurting, holding on to hurt, harm, and danger. You know what I'm saying? So I just was like, yeah, I'm not gonna be able to do this. Like, this is a waste of my time and my energy. And honestly, we're too old for this situation. But I just was like, okay, you know what? Say your piece, Michael. Move on. That'll be that. So as I'm continuing to date, I run into another guy from probably 10, 12 years ago. And the story is damn near the same story. I met the guy, years ago when I was with somebody. I was just now getting to know somebody and saying, like, I'm not going to date anybody else. I'm just going to get to know this person. And then I met, the guy that I reconnected with. I met him and he was just very like adamant about trying to get to know me and all this stuff. And I met him at work. Like, we were at work and he started working and noticed me and, then he pursued me. And so he was a gentleman and all that stuff, but for whatever reason we just couldn't we couldn't get on a page where it was like a romantic kind of situation. Like, yeah, he had some, well, I ain't gonna say he had no game or whatever, but he had a little finesse about him. It was enough to do what it needed to do or whatever. He's nice enough looking and all that other stuff, but unbeknownst to me, at the time, he had a situation that he was trying to work through or work out of or whatever. And so that was his reason for like how we lost contact. For me, I had already been seeing somebody, so it wasn't a big thing to me. Fast forward, sometime last year, so about a year ago, he sees me on Instagram just in a comment section where I posted something in the comment section. And he's like, yo, is it you or whatever? And I'm like, it is me in the flesh. I knew who he was. I could see his face. And so he's like, take my number, lock me in, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. Now, to be honest, I always wondered what happened with him. I always just was like, what if me and him really got a shot? I just used to always wonder, like, where is he? I never heard from him. We just kind of lost touch. But I thought about him over the years, just being like, what if he was the one that got away? And so when we got back into contact with each other, he approached me in the same gentleman-like way, but I could tell that life had done a number on like his emotional well-being and things like that. And so I was like, okay, well, what is going on? Like, what is your story? What you've been up to? And so, like I said, it mirrors the other story in that he is married to somebody, allegedly separated. I'm gonna take his word for it. He says he's separated, but I'm gonna use allegedly separated. And I'm like, well, how long have you been separated? You know what I mean? Because I need to know, like, has it been a few months? Has it been a year? Has it been a few years? Because that's a problem in itself that you've been separated for a few years and nobody's filing for divorce. Like, why are you not moving on? And true enough, it was a self separation and there had been no paperwork filed and it had been years. And I'm like, immediately I can't see or hear anything else because to me that means you are still emotionally and mentally tied to someone else. And so in my mind, I'm automatically like, I can't do anything with you. I don't care how nice you're talking. I don't care how lonely I am. Like, you are tied to somebody else. And I am not moving into a situation where somebody is already pre existing there and they have the autonomy, if they want to just come back and show up. And although the men, like I said, these two situations very much so mirror themselves, and I bring this stuff to the table. I'm like, I'm not dealing with you, and then that person pops back up when things are good, when things are building, and then we can't get married when it's time. Like, absolutely not. It causes too many variables to my success and my happiness, and I'm not going to allow that to happen. It's just this is preventable for me. It's like, oh no, they can't do that. It's whatever. We're good. No, we're not good because according to the law, okay, these people are entitled to half of everything that you own. And if we start building success together, now these mother tuckers are entitled to half of everything that I own and I built. And I'm not doing that. And the other thing I think about too, and I also mention, is that if something medically were to happen, heaven forbid, or hell forbid, I don't know, that it does, like, these people can pop back up and make the decisions, and if there is anything to gain, they can gain everything from it, because we haven't done our due, well, not we, because I ain't gonna be a part of that, but he hasn't done his due diligence on it. And so I'm like, for that reason, like, I can't, like, I can't even go any further with you because you're tied to somebody else. But I think this is an important conversation to have, because whether it's purely just emotional, mental, or even physical, like, you guys have great, sexual chemistry and physical chemistry, like, whatever keeps tying you to somebody, you need to untie that first before you go over here and interrupt and disrupt somebody else's peace and somebody else's, life and chance at romance and happiness. Because it's like a one foot in, one foot out kind of situation already. Like, you're laid up with me and you're really thinking about being laid up with him or her if that's what you do. And I have a problem with that. Like, you're always preoccupied. I don't want nobody laying betwixt my legs or sat upon my hips and stuff like that, riding the wave, if they are thinking about somebody else and would rather somebody else be there. I don't want to be a placeholder. I don't want to be no stand in for it. And the fact that you haven't separated yourself in whatever way from somebody tells me that you're not ready to put forth the effort to be with me anyway. Because there's no thrill in it for me, and there is no sharing for me. The other people that want to be community service folks and they want to share theirs, by all means, y'all hold hands, sing kumbaya, and eat out of the same crock pot. I'm not going to be able to do that. I prefer my own entree and stuff. So for me, I was like, I cannot do that. And I don't understand why it is so easy for people to just be like, oh, okay, no, it's fine. It's not fine. It's not. You need to close the door on all of those pre existing things, mentally, physically, sexually, and all the leads that are there. You should sever ties with all of that before you come over into somebody else's situation. And if you can't, perhaps you should sit with self for a little bit longer and figure out how you get beyond that. Because for me, I would never feel comfortable. And if I cared about other people, that would add another layer of my being uncomfortable in the situation. But I wouldn't be comfortable going and pulling somebody else into an entanglement or a triangle. It just wouldn't feel right. How do I say to you, like, I want you to be my only one? I want you to be, my other half, when you already got somebody else tied to it, anchored to it, and you already got a contract that is still in effect. Like, how do you do that? Every time you tell me you want to be in love with me, every time you tell me you want to marry me, I have to assume, and I'm using assume very, very sparingly and very, very, graciously, but I'm going to assume that you are lying. I'm going to assume that you are lying. Now, I would just say you flat out lying, but maybe there's a little bit of truth in there, because you haven't done your due diligence and you haven't done what you're supposed to do. It's the same for people who are madly in love with people. Whether they should be or not isn't even isn't even the objective. But there are people that fall in love every 3 months, every 6 months, whatever it is. I don't care what it is. You are tied to somebody else, and you need to go ahead and sever that before you come over here, because you're just not ready. And at the end of the day, you're cheating yourself out of true happiness by being half baked and halfway into it. And you're also cheating another person that didn't ask for that. You're cheating them out of a fullness of love and life and happiness as well. And if you really cared about anybody other than yourself, you would do the right thing, which is to stay with yourself or go back to that person until you figure out how to, sever the ties. But in my journey of dating, I have experienced several men. These are just two, but I've experienced several men who are married and allegedly separated, and they are okay with moving into new relationships. But a step further is I've met people who got out of relationships we're still emotionally tied to them, and we're like, okay, I'm gonna jump into something too. Where does that come from? I think that is one of the things that I kind of marvel at, is like, how is it that you got here when you are fully entrenched and enmeshed in the other person and you still decide to come over here and disrupt my peace? And I say this because there were several occasions where the men just kept talking about their ex or kept trying to bring it up. And as I've said before, I have a no talking about our exes rule, right? Maybe you can talk to me about your last relationship in those foundational moments where we're just like, oh, how long have you been single? And, why you been, what happened with your last relationship? I'm okay with it at that point. But when you are finding ways throughout our, tenure with each other to bring them up, and I can tell that you are getting visibly, audibly, emotionally caught back up in the person, I will say to you, like, do you need to go handle that? I feel like you need to go handle that because you still got something going on, and I can tell. And they're like, oh no, 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 and I'm like, yeah, 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 because I am never really in my chest about any of my exes. When I'm done, I am done. I'm not getting mad about nothing. I'm not getting anxious about nothing. Now listen here. Now, I may get excited recalling a time or two where we were having some happy adult fun time and stuff like that. Now, I may remember that because my body remembers, and it might tingle a little bit. But outside of that, I don't really care about my exes enough to really be enmeshed and enthralled in what happened between us. But when that happens, I'm like, yeah, you player, you need to just go ahead on and do what you were doing because for me it's not going to work. Oh no, I'm over him. No, you're not. No, you're not. And I hate to be the person to interrogate once, somebody comes into my situation, but I do ask, like, how long have you been single? Like, what was the reason why you broke up? Do you feel like that situation has come to a close? Because you never know. It feels like an interrogation, but you never know where somebody is in the journey. And I think what I've realized now is even when people are a month or 2 months out of it, you know, some people are, this is the hard part. Some people like myself, once we settle our issues on it, we go on about our business and it is what it is. There may be some residual things that pop up, a memory or something tied to something. But we handle it and we move on. But then there's other people who just cannot let it go. It doesn't matter if it's 2 years, it doesn't matter if it's 2 months, it doesn't matter if it's 2 days. They just cannot let it go. And for those people, I would say just sit with yourself for a little bit longer and figure out why you have centered somebody else at the epicenter of your life. I always tell people center around self first. Center around self first, always, and then allow other people to be in your orbit. And I don't care what that is, relationships, jobs, kids, whatever. Self preservation is the first law of nature, and I definitely believe in that. So, why would you center your everything, your emotional stability, your financial stability, your social, your economic? Why would you put all of that responsibility and ownership and reliance on somebody else? Center around yourself first so that if for whatever reason there is a shift, for whatever reason things get a little tumultuous, for whatever reason you need to get back to alignment, you are not trying to align to what somebody else has going on. You are aligning back to what you have going on. I am not putting anybody at the center and then allowing myself to be in the orbit. I'm not in my life. Understand me. In my life, I am the center and you're in my orbit. Not the other way around. I'm not walking through my life every day thinking every move that I make has to involve that person and has to be about that person. No. Every move in my life needs to be about me. And if that person really cared, they would understand that too. and they would be doing for them as well. And then somehow we would have some synergy and sync up, and we'd be doing what's best for the both of us, but maintaining that we are at the core and at the center of who we are. And those two things will be equally yoked or in alignment at some point. If not, you might not be the person I need to be with, is how I look at that. But I think that is important too, because I believe that people do have negative or toxic bonding that they do to somebody else, and then it becomes codependence or total dependence on somebody for your emotional, social, mental, sexual, all the walls of the world. You find yourself relying on that person for everything instead of learning how to fulfill yourself inside of. It's that person shouldn't be a complete replacement. They should be a supplement to the things that you have going on. But I believe that is the reason, or part of the reason, that these people just latch on and they can't let go. And it's because you've centered somebody else in your life and you shouldn't have. And so you have to not only sit with self for a bit and decompress from that person, but you also have to do a mind shift into how can I be self-sufficient, how can I make my core stronger so that I don't find myself scrambling and relying or feeling needy for somebody else to complete what I have going on. So I've realized that problem in my dating, and I don't have a full solution, but these are just my thoughts on it at this particular moment. But I do not want to be involved with someone who doesn't have a clear understanding of who they are, has not cleared a pathway for self, because in not doing for you, you certainly aren't going to be able to do it for me. If you're still tied to somebody else, you're not going to be able to tie yourself to me. If you're still in love with somebody else, you're not going to be able to be in love with me, not in a meaningful way, not in a full and fulfilling way. You're not going to be able to do it. And if you don't love yourself and you don't feel fulfilled about yourself, if you don't recognize it in you, you most certainly aren't going to recognize it, acknowledge it, and give it to me. So that is the work that has to happen. You have to sit with self and figure it out. But that requires unshackling, unchaining, unknotting yourself from whatever the thing is holding you back, the person that's holding you back. Because here's the thing about a knot, I always say, when you create a knot in a rope or a chain or whatever it is, once you create that knot just gets tighter and tighter and tighter the longer you keep going. And the further you keep pulling away, the further you keep pulling away, the tighter that knot keeps going. And you might tie one or two more. There is no way to get a knot out of a chain, a knot out of a rope, other than going back to said knot and unraveling it. And so where these people are creating, buying new chains and adding new ropes, and they all have knots in them, you need to go back, untie, let go. But you have to go back to the knot and you have to untie them. And sometimes they take just as long to untie as it did for you to tie it up and get it up and get it tight. So work on the knots. Work on the things that are holding you back, the ties that bind, the shackles that are holding you back. Take some time to work on that stuff. And then evaluate if you are ready to move forward into something new. But you can't do both. You can't try to hold on to things on both sides of the rope, both ends of the world. You just can't do that. You have to let one of those things go so you can fully immerse yourself in the other. And it's definitely got to be painful for you to keep holding on. And if it's painful for you, the only thing it could do for me as a person that's coming in on the freshly receiving end is it's going to hurt me as well. And I'm not going to do that to myself. So I don't want to be a part of a triad. I don't want to be part of anything poly or anything that involves someone else. I can't manage all of that. I'm doing well to manage my feelings and my emotions at this state, and even better to bring you in and want to care for yours and navigate yours as well. I don't have it for a third, fourth, and fifth person. I just don't have it. And that might not be a poly relationship. That might be relationships that you had 10, 15 years ago that you are still drudging things in on and still holding things to and all these things. Unshackle, untie yourself from those things so that you can move forward in a full and meaningful way.
And understand just because you may feel like you want to move on, or you may gauge your readiness to move on based on those said feelings, that that's not what it always means. Ready to move on means that you resolved whatever issues you've had. You've put the feelings, the thoughts, and emotions to rest, and they are no longer consuming your mind, your heart, and your body in ways that make you revert back to the old relationship or the old feelings or the old conversations that you've had with them. Because when you drudge in things from three and four and five relationships past, you're creating this devastating, disastrous pathway of just toxicity for yourself and other people. You're bringing in the negative things that you didn't like about person one through person five. You're then unable to see the person that you're with for who they are because every single thing reminds you of somebody else that you didn't resolve your feelings and emotions for. And so I would contend with any way that you are still connected to somebody. Maybe it was the best sex you ever had, and nobody's ever done you like that. Boy, I tell you, when they threw it back, they threw you back, you know? But you have to figure out how to separate from that. And that doesn't mean that you bring somebody else into it looking for the other person. It doesn't mean that you bring somebody else in and judge and critique everything that they do based on person one through five. It's not fair, and it doesn't create a space for newness and growth and for you both to curate whatever the love experience you guys or gals or they them want to have for each other. It's just not conducive to that. And when you find yourself in a repetitive cycle of meeting a new person every week or a new person every month or every few months, that should be a telltale and a sign that you have not untied the binds that you have with someone else. You have to get out of your own feelings for a second. You have to get out of your own wants and desires to move forward. And in those things, however difficult they may be, and maybe in that sometimes you have to confront some very hard truths about yourself. And maybe you are assigning blame or assigning responsibility to someone, and that is not where it was meant to go. Perhaps along the way, you lost focus. Perhaps along the way, your accountability wasn't in the right place. But until you go back to that knot and figure out how it got there, you're not going to be able to move on in a substantial way. When I see people who move on in theory, but mentally, emotionally, and all the least possible, they're still wrapped up and intertwined with somebody else. When I see those people go into something new and it lasts 3 months, 6 months, and they run right back to the person, I think how awful that must be to play this game of cat and mouse or to play this game, of back and forth. I think about it for the person that is bouncing, but I think about it for the receivers on the other end and what that might be. I'm not saying that you can't take an ex back, right? Sometimes you move on and you think maybe that's not the person you're meant to be with, and you think maybe there's something else out there. Maybe you go out in the world and realize, you know what? Maybe, the grass was green at home, and you go back there and you both are in alignment that that's what you want to do, and you both had a chance to kind of decompress and reassess. But I don't believe that that is the majority. But for those people, I think that's wonderful. And they can live a long lasting and loving and healthy relationship. But for the people that bounce back and forth between like a yo yo, whether you're doing it, you know what I mean, on your own accord, whether you're the person allowing it, however that may be, you're both grown adults. But as it relates to me, right, I want someone who has already severed those ties, that knows without a shadow of a doubt that they are done with the previous person. Now, I'm not going to say we can predict the future. Who knows? And as people change and as people grow, so do their wants, desires, and just the way they operate. So I don't know who's going to be what 10 years from now or where we'll be or what that looks like. But what I do know is that in this moment and in the moments that we decide to be in, of, and around each other, that I want my person to be immersed in what we are creating and not holding on to five or six trauma bonds. Or maybe they were in a relationship where they were kicked out, because that's real. Maybe the other person left them alone, and perhaps, they just don't want to move on. That happens too. But again, you have to go back and unravel those feelings and those emotions so that you can move forward 100% with the next person. And maybe that's just realizing that, hey, there is something about me that that person just didn't like. It was something about me that that person just does not relate with. And you just say that's enough for me to move on and not try to throw myself at that person. But I think we have a lot of people that get obsessed, a lot of people that feel like they own a person, especially if the person was, by all accounts, good to them in most ways. It's like, well, because they're good and because I had them first, they're mine and they're mine forever. And that's just not how that works. And so I don't know how to tell someone to get over being dumped when they're in love and they've done everything that they feel like they were supposed to do and it just wasn't enough. For me, just the mere mention or mere notion that you didn't want to be with me is enough for me to just pack my things and leave. I'm like, all right, you said that, and I move on. And in a perfect world, everyone would do that. However, in a not so perfect world, we have people that are preoccupied. And again, that can be a number of things, a number of reasons. But at the core, at the root, the resolution and the resolve is the same. Whether you were let go, whether you let somebody go, whether you were pushed apart, however you were separated, the only way to untie those emotional, mental, physical, sexual attachments, the only way to unattach from those is to go back to the point of where it happened. And sometimes that is physically. Sometimes you need to touch that person one more time. Sometimes you need to sit in their energy one more time. Sometimes it's that closing conversation. Sometimes you just have to have sex one more time. But whatever that looks like, you need to revisit it. And maybe it's that you guys had closure conversations and closure interactions, and maybe you didn't want to process it because you weren't ready to let it go. Maybe that's the knot. Maybe it's the why did still decide to hold on? I had my questions answered. I had my, conventions or thoughts confirmed and affirmed, and it's just done. Whatever that looks like for you, you have to go back and untie it. Sometimes it takes just as long as it did, to untie. And again, that's okay. If you spent 20 years with somebody and you need 20 years to unravel, my God, take 20 years to unravel your mental and emotional. For whatever reason, that's just sometimes how it works out. That could be divorce, That could be just lost, naturally or unnatural in some instances. And maybe you don't want to move on. But for those of you that are moving into a new space with someone, it is not fair to drag someone through your pile of shit. That's what I should have called it before when I was talking about the pathway of toxicity you leave behind. I should have just said the pile of shit that you create as you continue to go along. Seems more befitting. But it is not fair to the other people for you to continue to do that. And it's not fair to society at large, right? When I think about the bigger scheme of it, this often leaves a trail of mentally, emotionally, and physically wounded people who feel like they've been discarded. And it leads to you know, a population of people who feels just disconnected emotionally. And so I don't think we address that enough, that recurring situations like this that happen over and over again create brokenness in people. And sometimes that brokenness is a lack of trust. Moving into a new situation, it is a lack of self-validation because you were never seen as an individual. You were seen as a part of something bigger in somebody's picture. But whatever that disconnect may be, it is 100% preventable, and it's not fair. One of the things that coming out of my 5-year relationship that I wanted to be sure of was that the most effective, the most impactful, the most drawing to him emotions and feelings that I had, I wanted to make sure that those were gone. And these are the things that made me light up when he came into the house. These are the things that made me want to just randomly call him throughout my day. These were the things that I put on my maybe list that I said I wouldn't do, but now I'm like, maybe, because, he has just changed the way that I think and look at things. I made sure that I went through each one of those knots one by one to untie them because I knew if I still felt that way about him, I wouldn't be able to fully give that to somebody else. And how fair would that be? I also knew that I had to let go of the intimacy, those moments when we were just in the stillness and the quiet, or even sometimes in the anguish. And, we had to just sit in some moments that were really, really difficult. I had to let go of wanting that safety and really, yearning for that safety, if I may say so, and in some ways maybe being dependent upon it. I had to let go of that safety net in order to move forward because when I get excited, I don't want that to be the first person I think of. When I am going through something difficult, I don't want to revert back to thinking that is the only person that will understand. I don't want to keep having these peak emotional and mental moments in my life and putting this person somewhere in the midst of it because they were such a critical part of my life and in some ways a critical part of my day. I had to go back and untie those things one by one. And it wasn't easy. There were some things that I was like, okay, how did I get here with him? Okay. Is that something I can move away from? Of course. But then there were other things that were residual that maybe I did not see right away. I remember the first time having intercourse after we broke up, and mentally, I felt like I had disconnected. I was like, I mean, we hadn't had sex in a very long time anyway. And so by the time we broken up, it would have been a couple of months. And so we had been separated for quite some time. And I had worked through what I thought was all of my emotional, mental heartstrings and whatever was left. And my body had a very visceral response to having intercourse. And I remember feeling so uncomfortable. And I was like, wait, what is that feeling? And I was like, I don't know. I was tight in my shoulders. I kind of felt icky in a way. And not like, oh, we were sweaty or anything like that, but I just kind of felt like, I don't know, in some weird way, this feels kind of wrong. But why does it feel wrong? And when I went home and I sat with it and I said, it feels like I just cheated. But why does it feel like I just cheated? He's gone. He's been gone for a while. We haven't had this kind of interaction with each other. But what I realized is that with him, I had this very deeply emotional connection where everything that happened meant something. He was so thoughtful, and everything I knew just was like love down to the fingernails kind of situation. And I had realized that I had participated in an act that I shared with this person only for the last 5 years and looked forward to with great excitement and anticipation and just whatever we were doing. I just was like, yes, just to be in the space of, because I knew it was all love and it was all passion. But I had been with this person for years. And so not only was it a mental thing, it was very physical. Like my body came to know that when we move in this certain way, that this is what to expect. And when it wasn't the person and it didn't go that way, after the fact, it kind of felt like, what am I doing here? And so I was like, oh, wow. I had some deeper spiritual, energetic thing with this person. And then when I moved on to just and the other guy, right, I was getting to know him, and he was fine and all, but I did not have the emotional connection. I did not have that rapport built up yet. It just wasn't there. It just kind of something that happened. But I walked away from that situation feeling that, knowing where it stemmed from. And I could have done the thing where I stayed dealing with the person. However, it was one of the deciding factors for me to step away. And I remember as we were moving on and having subsequent conversations, I just felt he was very much so wanting to be physical in that way. And I just hadn't put that to bed. And I said, you know what? I don't think that I was ready as I thought, moving forward. And he's like, I thought you said that you were. I said, believe you me, I 100% felt like I was. But when that happened, it really just caught me off guard. And of course, he was upset. He didn't understand in that moment, but I was okay with that, right? Whatever discourse I received around, make sure that you're ready and whatever. I can only sure, right? You're absolutely right. I'm not going to contest that at all. And for me, it was very important moving forward to make sure that I did not bring someone else into my situation because inevitably we are going to have to get to the part where we have intercourse and it's going to have to mean something different than any of the other stuff that I ever had. But it started with getting past that started with untying whatever that connection was, that anticipation from that person. And so I did. I sat with myself for a very long time and I just kind of was like, okay, let's replay this. Let's replay this, just to see, like, okay, did we really answer the questions that we needed from that? Why was it that I was so drawn to him? Why was it, and how do you get away from it? And at the point where I was just like, you know what? Love is very singular in that when it comes to meeting new people, every situation you have should be custom. And it you don't take pieces from another, you don't intentionally take pieces from other relationships and try to piecemeal it together and try to make somebody that was into somebody who is currently. Instead, you need to just be in the moment and create whatever it is that you want to create with this person. Now, sometimes it can look the same, you know. I mean, I know there's all kind of books out there on how you can do love and intercourse and all those things. And so, you know, some of it may mirror that, right? But in the ways that count, this should be a reflection and a representation of what you two, whoever that may be that you get with, want to create with each other, and not you upholding something that somebody else gave you. And that was the loose of the knot for me, that I was like, okay, got it. Because if I keep holding on to the anticipation and the expectation that whatever I move into is going to be like that, then I will never get any further. Now, of course, all the great elements in your relationships, hopefully they've taught you a lesson in how to move, and how to be better in a situation for sure. And there's a difference from, you know, taking lessons in love and learning from love and just applying that as you move forward. There's a difference in doing that than assigning attributes from your past person to your present person. Like, okay, he was great at this, and I'm going to take that over here. Now you're going to have to be great with it. Kind of like when I see relationships where the person wants them to dress the same, they want them to wear their hair the same, they want them to wear the same brands, that kind of thing, where you kind of do this cookie cutter, like, okay, I'm going to bring that over here. To me, that is a telltale of not letting go, right? The individuality between the two of you, should absolutely be present, and the love should be custom or singular. The type of love should be singular to you two, and not just an extension of what you had or a continuation of what you had with the last person. So that is how, I worked through my issue, so that I wouldn't be preoccupied, and that I wouldn't be actively, you know, prospecting and finding people and getting involved with people, knowing that I had this going on and ruminating in my mind. Because again, it's not fair. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to me, and it's not conducive to growing into something new and meaningful. And so, if I can leave you with something, it is that you have to go back and untie the things that binded you to your past. Whether it's love, whether it's just life, whether it's family. I think this is one of those things that transcends the type of relationship. The only way to get away from it is to cut away from it. And you have to be willing to do that work, whatever it looks like. Because pretending that it's not there and trying to move on only makes it worse. That's what happens to a knot. You're like, let me set it down, I'll come back. And then, just like your Christmas lights, you find more and more knots, and it's like, how did we get here? Like, so it is to untie those things that bind you to your past and to focus on that singular love, that singular journey that is custom to you and the person that you're in the moment with. And that way you make something beautiful that's only for you, meant to be enjoyed by you, with you, just you, and your new boo, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But my hope is that you can move into the new year with a new light, a new mindset, and a new spirit of growth and just all around newness because that's what you deserve. And I think that's what you desire. This has been the Michael Experience. Thank you so much for joining. Until next time, go out there and love on yourself before you can love on somebody else. And I'll see y'all next time. Peace and love, y'all. Bye.